how the real estate economy works could be regulated by the government.
The real estate itself is what regulation is all about. So RERA is no exception to it. When RERA comes into play, it is for the buyer's goodness or transparency. RERA is to protect the builder. Real estate. This is one industry which is high valued and which is consumed almost 50-60% of investment market share of India. In spite of it, builders have to be aware that putting out a RERA ID is similar to defining a transparency in terms of sales. So that is mandated by RERA. How are they mandated?
I have a layman doubt here. Does plots have RERA ID and does commercial complexes have RERA?
How are you ready to market? Is that
What is the difference between a typical business account and what is the rationale behind having an escrow?
Escrow account is a conditional account between two entities. For example,
purpose of RERA? It gives legitimacy for a builder. It gives legitimacy for
perfect world is the RERA ID becomes the ID card for any transaction for the project.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to yet another episode of Reality.Club podcast. This is more a corrigendum to what we have been discussing in the previous episode, where we touched upon the profound aspects that revolve around the investors or the buyer's perspective into getting a property. Now, from the thought process, the ideologies, and the perspectives that vary from region to region and even from country to country, there needs to be a standardized regulation based on the law of each land. And when we actually were intending to deep dive into it, we were getting into understanding the pulse of them and how the developers perceive, how the agents sort of try to, get into the tug of war and eventually win between the developers and the buyers and so on. This is where a lot of unfair advantage was driven. And when I say unfair advantage, it has always been a skewed benefit towards one section of the entire ecosystem. This has put a lot of people in pedestal and quite a lot of players in the industry into pedestal as well. Today, we are going to be absolutely focused in terms of how this pedestal and a skewed perception of how the real estate economy works could be regulated by the government. And to begin with, we are starting with several players. We did touch upon how the builders function. Now we'd like to start deeper with how brokers function today, starting from India perspective to drawing parallels from the West, and what are all the best practices that this new regulation can come into play. And I'd like to once again begin with Arun in terms of how to take this discussion forward.
Basically, we have to touch upon the big B's, right? When I say big B's, the builder, broker, banker, and eventually the buyer, right? So when I say broker, let's not only imagine an individual who actually handholds a transaction and things like that. It could be big, large firms too, various intermediaries who assist just in home loan, who assist just in staging or who assist in just showcasing. So there could be a lot of one-off services which they handle in the intermediary. All of them put together, let's bracket them as brokers or the intermediaries. Right. So if you call these four people as big B's of the transactions, right, we would like to touch upon all of those. And then if we understand that 4B's, probably the guideline perspective, what we are trying to touch in the last episode and today will have much more clarity, because none of these four big B's can exist independently, right? They coexist and they are very highly dependent on each other for every transactions, which means a buyer is inevitable, a banker is inevitable, a broker is inevitable, and a developer or a builder is inevitable, right? So so any regulation over the period, like in the last episode, I was just trying to give a perspective of how there was past elite ownership was the driving factor for guidelines, and now we are at a peak of middle class ownerships of real estate, and the future is going to be much more digitally inclusive, decentralized sort of ownership, which is where we are actually heading towards, right? So if you see these three parameters, we have to consider what no at no point in time what we need to understand is the guideline has never switched replaced as such, right? It has always evolved, which means whatever we have as is where from where things have evolved, right? So we need to understand these two perspectives very closely, right? In That's why I felt that our topics were also very, very close to this, right? We were trying to touch upon the stakeholders on one side, and now when we are touching the guidelines, right? And now we are trying to make sure that without stakeholders, guideline can't exist, and guidelines are for the stakeholders, right? So it's more of that, right? So probably just to give that perspective, we need to this four big B's, right? The big B's what for the industry or the real estate itself, is what regulation is all about. So RERA is no exception to it, right? So when RERA comes into play, when we even though we say it is for the buyer's goodness or transparency, I also see RERA is to protect a builder, right? Is to protect a broker, right? Is to protect a banker, right? It's just not the buyer perspective, right? So it is also for B's who are going to get just not regulated. See, compliance is just not about for I would say the eventuality of a point of low, to avoid that, right? For anybody is what compliance as a routine is done, right, with government.
I would rather say it's a way of life for any business that the government gives us
Exactly. It is
as
not
an,
just about
yeah.
it is not about policing or putting guardrails, but it is to ensure that the system is very frictionless and painless, so that everybody can conform very easily without a fear or confusion. Right. So
At any point of time, if knowingly, unknowingly, if anybody does a mistake, right, it could probably be resolved, right? Without regulation or without compliance or this sort of framework, what happens is when there is a unknowing or knowingly or unknowingly whoever does what, there is always a point of no return, right? So there are cases like developers, unintentionally went into a trap of cash flow, right, and gone on to not finish the project. Thereby, people on the other side, in terms of brokers who got involved, got affected. Bankers who lended as home loans wanted to, unduly started to put pressure on the buyers for EMIs, and the buyers were actually, without getting possession, they were paying EMIs. So these are the scenarios of point of no return, right, without regulation.
yes, and most probably you, whether they like it or not, all the 4B's are tied in it all the time. So you don't just push yourself to a point of no return, you push everybody else to the point of no return. So
Absolutely. So so this is what we have to keep in mind. So we should not think RERA as something which is very much alien, or something an expert only could talk about it, or something like that. It's very, very simple, right? Any builder out there, if he knows his business, he should know RERA, right? Any buyer, if he's actually buying, he should basically understand RERA from at least a very very macro perspective as to what does it say, right? Today, for instance, in India, at least we know that without FS. Now, I said for food, any packaged food out there, right? Any retailing food in India today needs to have a FSSAI ID, right? So without which they can't really retail. So similar ways, an insurance company selling an insurance need to get something recognized. Try. You're right. And telecom is regulated by TRI, right? So similar way, there was a long due process. Long due things were waiting for real estate, right? Because this is one industry which is high valued and which is consumed almost 50-60% of investment market share of India. In spite of it, there was regulation which was pending, long due, I would say. That is what has come into in the name called RERA, right? Even though the RERA is a centrally given framework, it is implemented or because real estate is state subject, it has a very hybrid model, right? The framework is from the center, the implementation is from the state governments, right? So I think I'm being very preachy or educational here. Guys, you could just
This
pick up
is
something.
quite deliberate. You're landing into the right place right now. I want you to continue over here because I have few points to add as well.
So state governments implement RERA, right? So what happens is anybody who wants to sell real estate or would like to do broking, right, has to first get an ID from the RERA, which means the developer does not get the ID. The developer gets an ID for a project, just like a company gets an ID for a particular food, right, which is processed or packaged or retailed, right? For similar to that, a project which is out there to be sold has to get a RERA ID. Only then the developer or the builder is allowed or has the legality to even send an SMS. Why am I saying that much? Is that even an SMS or a WhatsApp, to promote the product, must have RERA ID in place. That is the mandate, right? Uh, Yes, of course. See, I do not know how many in an SMS we are limited by 120 characters. So how many of us actually put it on? Today, none of us use SMS. We've moved to WhatsApp. WhatsApp has no length restrictions, right? Character restrictions. So ultimately, the point is that builders have to be aware that putting out a RERA ID is similar to we demanding a FSSAI ID on a food packaged, right? If as a consumer, all of us, if we don't, will we ever buy food without that ID? No, according to me, right?
or even
Um,
or even a or even a simple other costly good is gold, right? Will you buy gold without BIS or 911 or whatever, right? I mean today, right? So
you're bang right. So that is the bare minimum thing which the builder has to understand, right? Second, what a builder has to understand is this also brings about the characteristics of the industry. It's just not about similarity of a food where I get an ID and I sell and that's about it. No, the very individualistic characteristics of real estate is that showcasing real-time availability and price, right? So that's the I would say that is the simplicity of defining a transparency in terms of sales, right? So that is mandated by RERA. How are they mandating? They are mandating by 2-3 ways, right? Which is one, you have to get an ID before marketing. To get an ID from us, you have to submit all the particulars, right? You need to get your approvals, you need to get everything from all the agencies, governments, finish everything before going to marketing, come and submit it to us, and then we give you an ID. with that ID go start marketing, right? So whatever you're submitting is available for the market to view, right? From where? From RERA website, right? From a RERA website in say Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or Maharashtra RERA, wherever, whichever website, all of us could go to Google and figure out, right, as to whether is this a legitimate project under RERA. If there is a RERA ID, all of us can be rest assured that the rest of the documents are in place, right, to go live. It's as simple as that, right? So that's why our RERA ID is very simple. One, two is that on day one, the builder conveys to the RERA that these many units are available and these variants are available by carpet area for every individual house. He's disclosing it, right? And also, he is going to update that unit stocks availability every quarter post that, right? There is a quarterly sales filing from the developer, which happens to the from the builder side, right?
I have a layman doubt here. So obviously, I'm assuming that uh, apartments have RERA ID. They're fully tagged, and then villas are probably like gated community villas are tagged and they have RERA ID. Does plots have RERA ID? Like if a developer is going to do DTCP approved or any government approved plots, right? Will they have RERA IDs as well?
Yes. All have a RERA ID. Everything has a RERA ID. As long as it is coined as a project, right? See, any cluster of development, real estate development, which is clustered development. What do we mean by cluster development? Is more than one, right? But there is a simple exemption for below 8 units. Say if you are having 8 units and below, you are RERA exempted.
Okay. And does commercial complexes have RERA? Just asking. It may not be our core area.
Yes. Of the new commercial complexes concerned for sales, yes. For renting, that's a different game altogether.
Okay. Okay. No problem. We don't need to go into renting. Fine. Yeah.
You understand, right? See, commercial is predominantly the sales of commercial is happens in a different way. It's not
Yeah, you have rent and lease and stuff. You have rent and lease and stuff.
different combinations, but definitely even in commercial, a simple sales of a commercial which has X number of square feet and above would go get into RERA. To my understanding, maybe I have to clarify, but my understanding is it is definitely there.
Yeah. Carry on with your residential thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So residential is like when it go past certain minimum criteria by default, like for an apartment it has to be 8 units, even for a villa, right? For even plots. So that's why this is not kept is like every individual who is buying and selling 1 unit, right? That they will not come under RERA, right? I mean it will be very cumbersome, right? So that's why there is a minimalistic and those units which are 8 in number are those guys who probably could be very much panchayat driven. They won't probably get approvals at a much larger scale. Many places even the building approval. For instance, in Tamil Nadu, individual house with up to 3,500 square feet is self approved, which means government is not approving it. I mean, as an individual, all of us could basically self-approved, certificate. That's more. Yeah. So keeping that aside, when we are looking at cluster development, which has the minimum size and above, right? All of that is going to get into a RERA, certification and things like that. This is from a building. So why the builder gives away says that this is the 100% of units on day one, and on a quarterly basis he is disclosing these many units are sold to the RERA, which is transparent and which is sacrosanct, right? It can't go back and forth, right? So this helps. This is one. Second is in terms of transactions, where this is where a bank comes in, right? So bank or a buyer, now I have to pay for a particular project or particular, I'm going to buy something under construction or even like at a completion level. What happens is at a project level, there is an escrow account which has to be opened up. That is also one of the mandate to get an ID. Okay, it's just not about approvals. On the other side, you have to showcase that I'm ready to market. How are you ready to market? Is that you have to open an account very specific with an objective of saying that this is for this project XYZ, and that escrow account is the only account which has to collect money for that project, right? And out of that project, there are financial regulations for the builder, which means at any point in time, he cannot withdraw money, I think about 30%, just like that, right? Almost 70% has to get into only 70-80% has to get into only construction end. So if there is any other end use beyond that, right? And that too, I mean, when I say construction, it's even it could be assumed that for the project expense only. Let's not put it as construction alone, because there are many other perspectives, right? Architectural cost.
This escrow is to, because I'm interested about escrow because you have that in the West as well, for many things, including home. So this escrow is for collecting money from people to whom you start marketing and selling the project. I mean, like homes or villas or whatever.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. Same.
Arun, I have a basic question here. What is the difference between a typical business account and what is the rationale behind having an escrow account? What, for a layman, is that escrow account? What are all the advantages and limitations around it? Maybe if you can touch upon a little on that, would be of some help.
Okay. So, whenever a company started, right, a company mentions that this is what I'm going to do in this company, that they mention it as an objective of the company where they form a company, right? Which means a real estate developer would start a company by saying that I am going to do real estate in terms of development, sales, XYZ in real estate, right? Having said that, from there, an escrow account is going to be one layer below, which means the escrow account is the current account is at a company level, right? So based on the company's formation, the current account is associated. Whatever the objective of the company rules the current account, right? Similar ways, a project is one layer below, wherein you open a escrow account with the objective of for that project only, which means that escrow can exist at the start date of the project and it gets closed by the end date of the project, and all the transactions which happen in that particular account can only be pertaining to that project.
Yes. Also, typically an escrow account is a conditional account between two entities. For example, uh, if I pay a small deposit on a home, like for example, this is a case even with my friend here, right? He's booked a $400,000 apartment, and if the first condition is to block it, and it's 3-4 months away, like as collection and further things, right? If they say that put a goodwill, there's a word for it, I forget, it's not goodwill deposit, it's called something else. Put down a $5,000 deposit on your escrow, and then the next step we will take care in the next 3 to 6 months. Now there is a commitment between the developer and the customer that this $5,000 is going to be only used for this purpose, and before that purpose is met, neither you can touch it nor I can touch it. Right now, if the builder doesn't deliver the project correctly or is unable to give you the home or whatever within a fixed period of time, that builder loses that and they're supposed to give you back the money. Whereas if you kind of go and say after a few months, I saw a better home, I'm not going to buy this home, you lose control over that money and that goes to the builder. So it's a kind of a commitment money where both of them are bound by that commitment, and failing which that money they will lose. So that is the
Arun, correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, sir, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it similar to authorized capital and paid up capital for the company, wherein you're dividing quite a lot of things for each and every project that you can't actually incorporate a company and therefore an escrow account? Is
No,
that
it's a very
so like that?
transactional. No, it's very transactional account. Yeah, Arun, you can
Yeah,
take it.
authorized paid up. I think that's a different lesson altogether. So, and maybe It's completely different, tangential. So that's not relevant, Balaji. So let's leave it there,
Yeah,
right? So
but it's a very small transactional this thing, and two parties are usually bound by it that to deliver this, otherwise you lose control over the money. So typically, to start building the project, you use it, and then you start taking deposits from people, so that you kind of in a gated manner you start delivering on milestones. If you don't deliver, the other person has the claim on that money, and you kind of
see,
lose.
ESCROW could be for any objective, right? So it is predetermined objective, and the purpose also is the same. What Badri speaks as purpose, and I say as objective, both are same, right? But predefined, right? That is what it is. So even before the account starts, you clearly say this account is opened for this purpose or this objective, right? Like my tone it is objective, Badri's tone it is purpose. So whatever may be, it is opening and stick to it. You can after opening, I mean after definition, you just can't go change it. I mean you can't go back and forth with the escrow with the objective. You can't change the objective.
And you can, and anybody you collect money from into that escrow account, has to be only for that purpose. That's it, simple, right? And you are bound by that purpose, and they are also bound by their commitment to that purpose when they put that money.
Escrow is very common for exports. There are various usage, right? In a demat account is one type of escrow account, right? In my view, so demat is typically where you open an account with an objective for taking that money and going on to trade with your stock exchange, right? You can't take money from your existing savings account or current account and go on to trade in your exchange. So the demat account has a particular purpose or an objective
The cash
that
part of the demat account. Yeah, the cash part of the demat account. Yeah. So there is, yeah, you take in money current from into the trading portion of this thing, and then till you kind of allot the share, that money is kept there. Usually the settlement of 1 day or 2 days or whatever, it will go only for that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. No, typically it is my people are bound to that money by a contract or by a purpose, whatever you call it, right? And they can use that only for that. And if any party fails to deliver, they lose possession of that money, and they can't simply take that money and run away. So
okay. So escrow account is that, right? So moving on from escrow, um, so basically builder or a project has an escrow account, which means the entire project management has to be done via that account only, right? What does this mean is that on day one, the builder says, "This is my escrow account, and this is my stock, and these are my approvals," and then only he's going to their body and getting an ID, right? Which means there is no other way that builder is liable to collect money. Or I mean, I'm not saying liable is a wrong word. I'm saying builder cannot collect money, right? So what is this for? Like a broker cannot get a commission away from this escrow, right? If he is operating, a banker who gives home loan must give it to the escrow. A buyer who gives money has to give it to the escrow. If they don't do it, let's assume, right? Who's the loser? The person who's paying is the loser, right? Basically, as a buyer, as a banker, as a broker, we are liable to why now you will understand why it is mandated for the builder to display the RERA ID wherever he goes, right? Because the communication or his showcase of project in however means, right? Be it to the bank, be it to the broker, be it to the buyer, he is going to display it along with the ID, which means with that ID, any of these the other three B's, the banker, buyer, and broker, could go to a RERA website, could cross check, okay, and get the escrow account details, and then do further transaction what they wish to do with the developer. Why should this happen? If there is a down scenario, right, a pessimistic scenario or a point of no return scenario, then government has the capacity to intervene and resolve it. The RERA body, I mean, when I say government, the RERA body, you any of us could go to RERA body and file our grievance, right, saying that this is what my grievance is, right, for which all of us should have at least known about this RERA ID, right? So a bare minimum thing is that, and there is a huge penalty for developers for not complying. The penalty is as much as 10% of the project, right? As cash, and I mean as upfront and things. So there are a lot of things. There are I think if I know it right, there are even jail terms
Your licenses,
attached.
your licenses to transact property, any real estate further can be revoked temporarily or indefinitely. Yeah, there's a vast level of punishments they can go into. Yeah.
It depends on the gravity of the offense. Yeah.
It's going to decode it line by line, but at least the purpose of this act and purpose of RERA is this, right? So it gives legitimacy for a builder, it gives legitimacy for a buyer money, it gives legitimacy for a broker, because he has an ID, and now if he's basically unable to get commissions, right? I mean, there are instances where certain RERA is even pushing to include agents part of the sale agreement today. That is evolving as we are speaking today. I'm seeing in few states where a sale agreement between a seller and a buyer, if there is an agent involved, then the agent ID and he is also party to it, right?
Because
And one,
basically what they are trying to do in a perfect world is the RERA ID becomes the ID card for any transaction for the project, and the escrow will become the P&L or the purse to deal with any income or expense related to that project, right? Anything I need to do regarding even building a brick or putting an ad or whatever for that project will come through the same account, and any cash collection for selling any part of this asset, which is a apartment or a villa or whatever, has to come from this escrow, and everybody's kind of tagged to that all along, which is why yesterday I was saying eventually this is all going to go into the blockchain or something like that, because nobody can ever tamper with this. Even today it is pretty tamper proof and digital, but then as we evolve, I see all of the parties kind of being very accountably kind of plugged in and registered into every part of this, just like you said, so that there is no kind of loss of data, no kind of traceability which is missed. So yeah.
so this is for the builder, right? Builder and his inventory and his financials. The third point is, how is the builder going to execute next, right? With whom is he going to execute sales and marketing? Who is he going to execute architecture? I mean, architectural designs. With whom is he going to get involved with structural, civil, right? Then the material, raw materials, labor, all of these things are also tied up, which means this has two tying up, right? So as per GST, developers cannot engage with vendors who do not have certain GST. I mean, above certain limits, right? There are just similar to the lower category. A minimum threshold is given, post which all the vendors must be engaged with GST. And second, if it is under RERA, the builder cannot involve anybody who is not registered in RERA to assist in sales and marketing, which means via developers, builders are also getting into RERA today. Yeah, sorry, brokers. Yeah, brokers. So build, builders cannot engage a non-RERA ID broker to assist him in sales and marketing, right? So if if as a developer, say Purvankara DLF, if he wants to get involved with 500, 600, 700, 800 builders, I mean brokers, then all that 700, 500 brokers must already have got registered at their state level RERA ID. So and because of this, okay, let me now move on to the broker. Okay, how is broker getting a license, right? Broker gets a license by paying a fee and for a 5-year license from RERA, right? So few states charge anywhere from 10,000. I mean, few states charge up to 25,000, 30,000 rupees per 5-year license. So a broker must pay a money, get an ID, and today it's just not about paying money. There are also certain tests which is starting to get conducted by I think Maharashtra Maharera is have started conducting tests. It's just not about paying money. You have to clear a test and then get an ID. So on one side, builder cannot engage with somebody who, like with anybody and everybody without an ID. On the other side, the broker who must get an ID has to go to the state government and submit. Yeah, he's going to disclose that am I a partnership, am I a proprietor, or am I a private limited. He's going to say this is my PAN card, this is my Aadhaar card, this is where I reside, right? This is my all of these things he gives, and then he says this is my bank details, right? When he or is going to say that this is my company, and he's going to give his bank details and then probably get his ID, right? Why is it all done? Because eventually, in my view, in next 1-2 years, the builders are going to basically start transacting from that escrow account of the project to these broker accounts, right? In terms of commission. So this is how it's going to move.
And there you set up the platform for a better traceability. You clearly know like what percentage you actually spent on sales and marketing, and you kind of all sorts of analytics and data, and also fiduciary regulation and all of that. You kind of get a much better analysis of okay, who was engaged in selling this, what was the spends and all of that, both for the builder and for the government. So there is that level of transparency and clarity at any point. If all of these people are RERA registered, if all of them kind of pay to each other through this escrow, so that you kind of can map it to the project ultimately. Yeah.
Next comes to the banker, right? A banker funds a project for in terms of construction loan, and also he funds individual buyers for home loans. Right? In both these scenarios, what happens is there is an under construction stage for the banker. The banker must know whether the money given as credit is utilized and converted as the asset. I mean that's the ultimate purpose, right?
Yeah,
The
like any
bank
factory
wants
also, like lending to any factory or industry also, right? They have typical levels at which they can lend x percentage for the project, right? Typically there's a 100% loan, and then at each they will have definitely, typically for any kind of experienced industry, they will know like at this level I can give 10%, 20%, 30%. Yeah. So go on.
So pre-RERA, what happened was the bank and the builder. I mean, bank determined what was the construction progress, and bank determined the payment schedule. Bank and builder were able to form certain nexus at some point of time to basically take out money up front, and then probably and then tend to not being transparent, divert that to buy certain lands instead of construction or few other projects and things like that, which went on to trap the entire project itself, right? Which point of no return for the bank, which means bank is the depositor's money, right? Ultimately, so which means it's going to affect the entire economy also in larger sense. So, in that perspective, if you see, RERA has mandated almost everything right about the builder from day one, and now the bank need not worry about any of these things. And all it has to worry about is that I have put put my, I mean, I have given credit to the escrow account. Now, as per escrow account, I just not know the photograph based on photograph or videograph. I understand the construction progress. It is also that there is a government who has regulated the project in terms of end use, right? So that is also a very comforting factor for the banks, I would say. That from the construction loan. From the home loan perspective also, if you see the buyer prior to RERA, it was very difficult, right? As per RBI, at every stage, before release of money, the buyer have to give a consent to the bank, and against buyer consent only, the bank has to release money to the builder, even if the builder has completed his due construction stage. So this is like two-edged sword, right? Which means there were always bad customers and there was always bad builders also. So which invariably in both these scenarios, project gets delayed, right? The builder promptly finishes the stage, the buyer delays the consent, thereby the money doesn't come on time, the project gets delayed. On the other flip side, the buyer is without buyer consent, the builder gets money, money is not induced for the project, it gets moved away, again the project gets delayed, right? This was pre-RERA, right? So now, at least because at various level, this end use of the money is uh, uh, put in place, which means the builder is liable to use from the escrow almost 70-80% towards the project. The bank must give it only to the escrow, and then a bank also has to monitor the stages, and now buyer has to give consent. All these things are going to ensure that there is no delay from the builder side or the banker side in terms of thing. Today what happens that buyer can still be the culprit, right? This is where most of the builders have still not figured out that RERA is helping them, in my view. Because just imagine a project is there are 50 houses are there, right? And as per sale agreement, I go enter into a buyer, I go enter a sale agreement with construction agreement, sale agreement with the buyer, saying that this is how I'm going to construct in this duration, at these stages you have to pay me money, right, on completion of these stages. Invariably what happens is there were typical buyers, if you see, they tend to block 10%, 15% as the initial amount, and they typically tend to delay the middle portion of the money of their apartment, right? And all because, and they always feel that builders can't sell and things like that. They always say that, hey, if you feel that you can't give me time, then you could cancel my apartment, right? This is the typical conversation between a builder buyer would happens. Builder invariably would say, okay sir, fine, give me after next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So just imagine if this is the case, out in a particular floor there are 8 houses, and out of 8 houses, 2 people have not given, which means almost, I would say, what, the 30%, 30% of 25%, right? So 20% of the people have not paid for the construction, right? Only 75% of the people have paid for the construction. The 25% is from the bank's money, and the builder has to progress further for the next slab with 100% investment. So the typically where the delay is because of those two bad apples, the customers, right? So how is this maintained is that in spite of in previous RERA, builder used to put that if you delay, there is 18% interest to your money, right? They've never implemented that. If you don't pay on time, I would cancel it and give it to somebody. That they were not able to prove, right? But today in RERA, because everything is traceable, right, from day one, even a buyer, a bad apple called a buyer filing a wrong case can easily be proven wrong and probably penalized as a buyer, right? This defense by builder has, right? A banker has. So
because
these are,
builder is consistently filing their construction progress with the bank also, so there is that double accounting ledger that a progress is there, only this buyer is not cooperating.
so typically, if you see all pre-RERA, what happened was all of these problems in the industry was put only, the poster boy for all of these problems was only builder, right? If there is a problem with the broker, builder will be blamed. Problem with the banker, builder will be blamed. Problem in delay in project, builder will be blamed. But the delay or all of these may not be 80% of the time would be with just builder alone, because he can't act alone, right? So today, moving forward, to resolve that, right? That's where RERA comes in, wherein a grievance redressal or anything, even boldly a builder can cancel a customer if he has a clear cut track record of all of these things, right? And if that bad customer goes on to file a case in RERA, he could clearly stand a chance to win it boldly, biggerly with a compensation,
I understand. There is all over accountability. There is like supply side and demand side accountability, right? So there it's not one way street, right? At the supply side of the asset or unit, you know how the construction is going on. The bank is very clearly aware. At the demand side also, you know what the buyer's interests are. Are they making their commitments right? Is the builder making their commitments correctly to the buyer? All of that. So yeah, both the supply side and demand side is logged with RERA at all times. So yeah, no, I think it's a good note to kind of uh, summarize or close for today, because you've given a very good picture. We keep talking RERA for a long time now at Reality, so I think this is a very good kind of place to kind of fantastic brief today. I think a lot of education for Balaji and me as well about what RERA
This
is,
was a
what it
great
is.
start in terms of how the entire ecosystem works right from the grassroots level, so that this sort of sets the tone as to how the economy works around the industry. And thanks, Arun, you were absolutely precise. This anybody would understand when they look into
Yeah.
it.
One point I just wanted to highlight or close was we spoke about the guidelines in terms of future digitalization, right? With this escrow account and with this sort of traceability, digitization is already in place, according to me. It's just about further taking this digitalization into much more efficient processes in automations and workflows. Do that would take this industry like super crazily better with already UPI and financial system digitized. Real estate is getting digitized as we speak. Our GIS information and register offices are getting digitalized, right, by state. So these sort of frameworks are in place. All of us as big 4Bs, have to be aware of it. And in next 3 4 years, because of this, there's going to be a lot of demand for the industry. There's going to be crazy transactions, right? Crazy reselling because sales becomes easy. Sales become, I mean, every inventory is accessible from everywhere. So that means, see, the dynamics is going to change in this industry in a matter of next 2 3 years, just like how UPI hit us the last 5 years. This is going to happen in the immediate future. Yeah. With that note, I would like just
Yeah,
Perfect. Perfect, Arun. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming over. We had an early start, and this has been the most comprehensive insight when it comes to the regulatory side of things. And I think from here, it will be much easier for us to progress on in terms of how various other aspects of the ecosystem functions. And eventually, a lot more insightful sessions will be cropping up in reality.club. On that note, thanks for today and see you in the next podcast.
thank you, thank you.